good evening everyone, and welcome to our next episode of Truth Matters, where we seek to distinguish between myth and reality. And with so much fake news going around on social media, it's very important for us to be able to understand what's really taking place in our world. And so this is something that we're doing together as two churches, Reach Summerstrand and Emmanuel Church. And we're really looking to get someone from within our churches to who works in a specific field to give us some expert opinion on a certain issue and to help us understand what's really taking place, and also to give us a Christian perspective on that issue. And so last time we looked at the state of the pandemic in our city, and we had Dr. Rob Freaks helping us to think through that. And we're thrilled this evening to have Advocate Willie Kingsley, who's a member at Reach Summerstrand, and he's going to be helping us think about corruption in our city and in our country, and how we should be responding to that as Christians. So great to have you with us, Willie. Thanks for joining us.
Great to be here. Thanks, Guy.
Yeah. So Willie, maybe you can just start by telling us a little bit about the work that you do, and maybe specifically about the current case that you're working on regarding Eskom.
Sure. Well, as some of you may know, I've been brought out of relative semi-retirement, having been both involved in the civil and criminal legal fields for many, many years, and that happened in June of this year. I was asked to come back to the National Prosecuting Authority and to help them out in the asset forfeiture unit particularly, which seeks to get back ill-gotten gains from some of the people who are involved in massive corruption and other criminal activities. So, as Carl pointed out a moment ago, the case I've been asked to come back to specifically is one concerning Eskom and the millions that were siphoned off from the period of about 2015 to 2017-18, and which we are busy trying to compile now that many reports, forensic reports and others, have been compiled, and to put it in such a way that the matters can be taken to court. So I'm involved in that. It is a matter involving more than 900 million rands, and obviously some of the assets have been frittered away, some have been hidden successfully, but some we've been able to find. And so the good news is that the wheels of justice may grind slowly, but they do grind, and that we hope that there'll be more arrests shortly, and that we'll be in court to seize and freeze some of these assets. So that's in a nutshell what I'm busy with doing, all the documentation, the affidavits, and all the court papers that are needed for this sort of process.
Great. Well, okay. I think we'd all agree that it's a very important task that you're involved with. Now, we often hear about corruption in South Africa, but for those of us who aren't that involved, could you maybe just give us some idea of how big a problem it really is, and what are some of the effects that this is having on our country?
Sure. Yeah, things have got worse, it seems, over the last at least 13 years. And why do I say 13? It's because that was the time when the Sheikh matter hit the courts, and obviously the media as well. This is a case in which former President Jacob Zuma is involved, and which is still possibly going to come either later on this year or next year. And this particular case, the judge then set out what is regarded as corruption. I think it's good for us to understand that this is legally what the corruption position is in South Africa and what it was in 2013. So I quote from the Sheikh case. It says, corruption is a phenomenon that can truly be likened to a cancer, eating away remorselessly at the fabric of corporate probity and extending its baleful effect into all aspects of administrative functions. The judge stated that this manner of corruption has to be checked and prevented from becoming systemic, as the effects of systemic corruption can quite readily extend to the corrosion of any confidence in the integrity of anyone who has a public duty to discharge, leading unavoidably to a disaffected populace. Basically, the court was of the view that it was a pervasive and insidious evil and that the public interest required its rigorous suppression. That was in 2007. More recently, a case which was reported earlier this year, but which hit the Constitutional Court last year, is a case called National Director of Public Prosecutions versus Botha. And the judges of the Constitutional Court more recently then have said this: bribery and corruption in public procurement have become systemic in South African society. Corruption affects us all. It intersects at points of social, political, economic, and ethical discourse with no end in sight, and thus remains an elusive malignancy slowly eroding our hard-won democracy. While stories of the high-profile looters reach the media, the more low-key public officials who sit behind their desks committing acts of public procurement corruption with disturbing frequency may ultimately have an even greater catastrophic effect on our economy and society. In this case, a bureaucrat who was a senior official in charge of public procurement was involved in bribery and corruption, resulting in the loss of billions of rands for the Northern Cape province and the country. Public resources are largely beneficial to poor people. It is they who suffer the harmful effects of corruption most grievously. Corruption has become an albatross around the neck of economic growth and a major hurdle to economic development. And that really sets the context for corruption in our country. It has really got pervasive, and as I mentioned just now, worse, seemingly, to what it was in 2007.
Right.
And that is the negative side of it, because it affects the whole of society.
Right.
Confidence, not only in those who are placed in governing positions, but also in the whole economic fabric. Because, as you might know, or maybe you don't, that for corruption and bribery to flourish, it needs somebody in the public sphere, like in government at whatever level, plus somebody in private practice as well, a business, the Bosasas of the world, who get involved and pay the bribes to willing recipients. So it erodes everything. And it takes a long time to change this whole mindset and the pervasive cancerous effect on society. So that really, in a nutshell, is the bugbear that we are dealing with as a country, and also in the legal system, and obviously broader than that.
Right. Now, I mean, that's very concerning, and I think it's tempting for us when we hear information like that to be concerned for a few moments, and then maybe just to hide our heads in the sand and kind of just think it's too big a problem for us to confront and just kind of hope that it'll go away. Yeah. What would you say to that type of response, especially for us as Christians who should be the most concerned about justice and corruption?
Absolutely. I'm so glad we've got lots of examples in the Bible. And so I just wanted to say, what do we do as Christians? We cannot just do nothing, because otherwise the cancer of corruption will continue to do its nefarious work, and we will never be able to turn back what the locusts have eaten. So we've got to do something, otherwise it'll get worse. As Christians especially, and so I just wanted to go back to what Isaiah said. He said in chapter 1, verse 17, learn to do good, seek justice, rebuke the oppressor, defend the fatherless, plead for the widow. That's what he said. And of course, some of you might remember, going back to David even, and Psalm 37, I just want to highlight that, because he also talks about the good side of what we as believers can do. So just a few verses from Psalm 37 I'd like to quote. Do not fret because of evildoers, nor be envious of the workers of iniquity, for they shall soon be cut down like the grass and wither as the green herb. Trust in the Lord and do good. Dwell in the land and feed on his faithfulness. Delight yourself also in the Lord, and he shall give you the desires of your heart. Commit your way to the Lord, trust also in him, and he shall bring it to pass. He shall bring forth your righteousness as the light, and your justice as the noonday. Rest in the Lord and wait patiently for him. That doesn't mean that we do nothing.
Sure.
And that's why, just at the end of this passage I want to refer to, it says that from verse 9 to 11, those who wait on the Lord shall inherit the earth. And The meek shall inherit the earth, and shall delight themselves in the abundance of peace. Now I'm sure some of you might remember what the Lord said in the Beatitudes about the meek. And he said, blessed are the meek, they'll inherit the earth. Exactly what we read here in Psalm 37. Also, we are called on there to be merciful, to be peacemakers, to, even if we are prosecuted for righteousness' sake, to stand up and be counted. Because we need to be salt of the earth. If the salt has lost its flavour, what is it worth? Just to be thrown out. Or we're also meant to be the light of the world. And so that the world can see our good works and glorify our Father in heaven. So we are called on to be different to those who stick their heads in the sand and say, it's just too big, we shrug our shoulders, we'll try and just do what we need to do. Right. We have to stand up against it. We have to be, as we are exhorted to do, people who are of a different quality, a different character. People of integrity will stand up and confront evil. Right. And I believe that is the way to go.
Right, that's very helpful. So, as Christians, we shouldn't be fretting, we should be trusting the Lord, but at the same time, we've got commands like Isaiah to seek justice and to stand up for the oppressed and to fight the oppressor. Maybe we can get a little bit more practical about that. I mean, apart from just being a whistleblower who reports corruption if we witness it, are there any other practical things that you feel that we could be doing as Christians to try and fight this thing?
Yeah. As I've mentioned a moment ago, we have to stand up.
Right.
But obviously to do it in the right way. Right. Whistleblowers have always found it very hard going because of the blowback. You can remember Deputy Minister Jonas, who was the Deputy Minister of Finance a couple of years ago, who withstood a massive bribe to do his work, and everything broke loose against him. And there have been other people who've stood up, most of them, because they are Christians, and they will not bow down to that. So that's number one. You have to stand up, do the right thing no matter what happens. And you actually have to hold those in authority or those who are involved in it to account. And we as Christians have got that duty. We have to speak truth to power, as it were, and we need to be unashamed about that. Even in my situation, where I get together with my colleagues, I try to encourage them to do the right thing. If something like this happens, do not just leave it one side and say somebody else might pick it up. I'm too scared to do something about it for my own sake. And we cannot do that. So we take examples from those people who have already gone before. Whistleblowing is good, but there's more to it. And we need wisdom as to how to do it. So how do we get wisdom? We need to pray. We need to pray for insight and for discernment in whatever happens in our sphere of influence. Sometimes things appear on the surface of it, and most of these corrupt dealings appear to be okay on the surface. And somehow, if you scratch a little bit, then you find out there's something wrong. And that's where one mustn't say, well, let's see how far. Is this really this or that? We need more discernment to actually say, is this going down the wrong path, or is this just somebody who's not up to the job and he's making a mistake? Because those are possibilities as well. Not everything that looks corrupt is necessarily corrupt. But we need to be wise as to deal with it. So, what I want to say is you've got to stand up. We have to pray for discernment. And we've got to trust that God will vindicate those who do good and who are standing up for them. So there's that. There's another aspect of it too. And that is a corporate sense in which we need to stand up. And I know in Port Elizabeth there is a group of ministers and of other people in the what they call the religion or faith sphere in Port Elizabeth who are speaking to the Premier of the province, who are also speaking to our Mayor. And it's always difficult when there's just an acting position. But they are actually trying to say, we'll be with you in a month's time again. And there are certain issues that we'd like you to come back and tell us what you're doing about it. Yeah. That you can't just pass the buck and say it's going to be somebody else's problem. Right. Make it their problem so that they actually will do something about it. Right. And I think that's very important, that we all, whether we write just a note, a letter to the newspapers, or whether we just speak to our friends, we need to stand up and say, we have to be of a different character, and we need to address this issue. When we see the signs of corruption, broken drains, sewage flowing wherever it is, potholes everywhere, it's just a symptom of the larger malaise.
Yes.
And I've been encouraged by recently ordinary people of society saying, look, the verges aren't cut. The beach is looking bad. There's rubbish everywhere. Why can't we step up and say, we want to clean up as well. We want to show that we are different, and we're prepared to do something like that without cost to anybody. And let people come to us and say, why are you doing this? And so because we believe we're a witness to the larger society, and we've got to stand up from the small to the big in every possible circumstance that we're faced with.
Yeah.
So, I hope that gives you a few ideas.
Yes. No, that's very helpful.
Yeah.
Thanks, Willie. That's very helpful. And I suppose the beauty of being in the church is that if someone is facing some opposition as a whistleblower, that there's a community that can stand behind them and support them, and we can be praying for people in positions like you who are having to fight these cases, and those people who might be facing some opposition as they fight corruption. Maybe just finally, you're a Christian. You've got a personal relationship with Jesus. Could you just tell us a little bit about how that affects the way in which you go about your work and how it motivates you to do this work?
Sure. I've always regarded it as a privilege to be able to serve others, and this is the bottom line. Every day when I get to the office, whatever I do, I ask the Lord to help me, and it inspires me, and people that I see, I'm able to speak to them as well in a way which will encourage them to do the right because of the basis that I've got in my faith. It's opened lots of doors over the years, whether it's police, whether it's colleagues, other people that we deal with. It's a wonderful opportunity, and I think that's the basic thing that motivates me every day, is to say, my Lord was a servant, came as a servant. What greater thing is there for me to serve others as well in His name, and to remember that what I'm doing is with His insight, with His strength that He gives me, and His everything that I have and am is because of Him and what He's done for me. So I just took this little verse from Philippians 2, verse 14 to 16 as well, when I was thinking about this, to say we shouldn't be like those who are around us who complain about everything. Everything is negative and so on. We're in the midst of a crooked and perverse generation, as the word says, but we need to be shining as lights in the world. So I regard that as an opportunity of being able to shine for the Lord. It's not been easy lately because I've been locked up in my own little office for most of the time, and not many people have come through, but even through the medium of online discussions I've been able to have with people all over the place, in all sorts of ways. We keep on letting our light shine. And that's what I love about being God's child, where He's put me.
Right. Yeah, thanks so much, Willie. It's so great to have Christian people living out their faith in the world and shining as witnesses for Him. So thanks for sharing with the rest of us, and we appreciate the work you're doing. And we're now going to move across to our Zoom discussion, and hopefully there'll be some other people who've got some questions which Willie can seek to answer.
Love to do that.